Okay.
Welcome everyone to this one of the workshops for today. Linda McCarthy is a mother of a recovering addict. Linda is a wife, mother, and a white-collar professional. She was not prepared to be the mother of an addict. This unexpected turn of events has led her to support those agencies who advocate for youth that face challenges in life due to addiction and mental health. New to advocacy herself, she has already been awarded the 2018 CMHA Simcoe County Supporters Award. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah, and welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me at the back?
Yes.
Okay. Hello everyone. It is an honor to have been asked to speak at this year's conference about addictions, hope, and recovery. Those three words are a big part of my family's story. This is the first time I'm speaking to a group, so I'm very nervous, sorry. My name is Linda. I'm a wife, daughter, sister, aunt, daughter-in-law, sister-in-law, a full-time licensed optician, loyal friend, and a mom. More importantly, and the reason I'm here today, is that I'm the mother of a son recovering from a substance abuse disorder. What is addiction? It is described as an uncontrollable, compulsive behavior. Let's talk about that for a moment. Some of you may think an addict is an addict is an addict. These are the kinds of people you may envision when you think of someone with a drug addiction. Certainly my perception of someone with a drug addiction is someone with scabs on their face, missing teeth, and an overall disheveled appearance. But I'm here to tell you that addiction can happen to anyone, even those who have a good upbringing and come from a good family. It could happen to any one of you in the audience, or someone close to you. Maybe it already has. There are many debates on whether addiction is a disease or a choice. I fully support the premise that addiction is a disease. One such group, the U.S. group Absolute Advocacy, states that although it may be true that the initial ingestion of a substance is voluntary, the consequences that follow are almost entirely uncontrollable. Cravings deteriorate the person's ability to function in society. Addicts have an uncontrollable craving for their drug and will go to any length to obtain it, regardless of any negative health, professional, or social consequences. Their need for drugs becomes all-encompassing. This is my son, Ryan. He is charming, caring, and intelligent. He's also recovering from an addiction to heroin. Currently, he is serving a 3-year sentence for trafficking of fentanyl and criminal negligence causing bodily harm. He also comes from a good, supportive, loving family. Not the look of someone I'm sure you picture being addicted to drugs. October 2nd, 2016, this is the day my life as I knew it changed forever. I received a phone call from my ex-husband saying that Ryan was in a lot of trouble. I had no idea what that meant, but I do remember reading the news that morning, and the headline read that 5 people had overdosed in downtown Barrie. I remember thinking, my God, what is happening to our city? I never thought in a million years my son would be associated with that headline. It was more than a little overwhelming. As a parent, there are so many emotions running through me: anger, sadness, regret, helplessness, worry. As it turned out, Ryan was asked by a friend of his if he could get her some cocaine. Ryan was in full-blown addiction at this point, and he knew people he could get cocaine from. Because he was using, he had his own supply of drugs. Unfortunately, in a hurry to go and meet her, he grabbed one of his own bags, a bag that contained heroin mixed with fentanyl. Ryan became aware that he had given her the wrong drugs when she called to complain that he had shorted her for what she had paid for. Ryan immediately told her he had given her the wrong drugs and not to touch any of it, that he was coming right away to exchange the bags. With Ryan on his way, the friend and 4 of her friends consumed some of the drugs Ryan initially gave her. Because the bag contained fentanyl, they consumed more than they should have, and they all went into medical distress. Thankfully, they all recovered quite quickly. It was a very dangerous situation, one that could have had devastating consequences. We learned after that Ryan had just been introduced to fentanyl that week. He was willing to try it because he couldn't get any pills or heroin from any of the dealers he used, and he was desperate. His addiction was to the point that if he didn't take something, he wouldn't have been able to go to work. Because of the seriousness of the situation with his friend and the others overdosing, we knew he would be facing serious criminal charges. We contacted a lawyer, and Ryan turned himself into the police the following day. He was charged with trafficking in cocaine and fentanyl, and 5 counts of criminal negligence causing bodily harm, and was held for bail. We all had a sleepless night filled with worry. I had a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that my son could be involved in this mess. They did release Ryan into the care of both his father and I with some very strict conditions. He was put on house arrest. However, he was allowed to go to and from work and could be out in the community as long as he was with either of his parents. When Ryan was released on bail into my custody, he divulged the full extent of his addiction to his father and me. I was shocked and saddened to know that Ryan had an addiction and that it was at the stage it was. My immediate thought was that he was addicted to marijuana, since I knew that he had smoked it, and there would be no way either of my kids would be involved in anything harder than that. I couldn't have been more wrong. As my son stood before me, saying that he was a heroin addict, my head was spinning. I rolled up his sleeves, expecting to see track marks, since that's what I saw in the movies. He explained that he could never put a needle in his arm, that he always snorted it. Again, a real eye-opener, as I didn't know that heroin could be snorted. They say an addict, any addict, needs to hit their rock bottom before they ask for help. I don't know if this was Ryan's rock bottom, but it was at this time he asked us to take him to the methadone clinic right away. He was determined to get off the drugs and get healthy. I've led a pretty sheltered life. I had no idea what a methadone clinic was. For those of you who may not know either, methadone is used for the treatment of opioid use dependency. It is taken in a liquid form, and it replaces the use of opioids such as heroin, perks, and oxys, without the high, so that the addict won't have withdrawal symptoms from not taking those drugs. It is a way for the addict to safely wean off the illicit drugs, and is the most commonly used treatment for addiction. Methadone is used as part of a drug addiction detoxification and maintenance program. It can only be prescribed by a specially trained medical doctor and is only available from a certified pharmacy. And so, we began Ryan's journey into the methadone program. Ryan has done very well in the program and is currently using a very low dose. He was very serious about quitting all drugs, which he did right from the day of his arrest, and is now focusing on getting off the methadone. Quitting drugs of any kind is hard, especially cold turkey. Unlike the illicit drugs, quitting methadone cold turkey is not an option, as the withdrawals can cause serious harm because the medication stays in the body longer. The withdrawals from methadone can last 3 to 6 weeks, with most people finding it unbearable. And so, some will relapse and turn back to the hard drugs. Getting addicted to the methadone can also become a problem for some, and so patients need to be weaned off it to be successful. I will never forget Ryan's first week on the methadone program. I brought him home to my house and took the week off work so I could be there for him during this huge adjustment he would be going through. The doctor put Ryan on a low dose of methadone for the first week. He does this because he doesn't know what other drugs are in the patient's system. Certain drugs do not show up on urine tests, and also to prevent an overdose. Because the methadone dose was so low, it wasn't really helping him. That's when the withdrawals kicked in. As hard as it was for me to see Ryan going through the withdrawals, it's not something any parent wants to see. It was a week of hell for Ryan. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat much, he was sweating and freezing cold, he had diarrhea, he couldn't sit still because his legs were so restless. He said it felt like spiders were crawling all over his legs. He really thought he was going to die. He described it as having the worst flu you could ever imagine, and then times it by 100. It is the withdrawals that come with trying to come off the opioids that is the reason many cannot break the cycle of addiction. During the time he was home on bail, he had been coming down off the methadone at a steady pace. At his highest dose, he was at 70 milligrams, and by the time he went into custody, he was at 4.5 milligrams. This, according to the doctor, is not an easy feat, and most people will relapse at some point, but Ryan never did. He actually wanted to be completely off the methadone, but the doctor said he wanted him to stay at a low dosage so he wouldn't relapse in prison. I find it really upsetting that the doctor's worried that he may relapse because the jails are well documented to have severe drug issues. Why and how are the drugs even getting into the jails? That is a whole other conversation, but I feel very strongly that filling the jails with addicts where there isn't a lot of support can be detrimental to their recovery. And I really hope we see some big changes regarding this in the near future. Especially since, according to the Correctional Service of Canada, upon admission to federal custody, almost 70% of federal offenders are assessed at having some level of substance abuse problem requiring intervention. The whole experience was taking an emotional toll on Ryan as well. He cried a lot, he seemed depressed, and he felt immense guilt during this time, mostly because he couldn't believe that 5 people almost died because of a mistake he made, but also because of the embarrassment and mortification his actions caused his family. This ordeal has put a real strain on our family. Our younger son was extremely upset when Ryan was arrested. They were both working at the same place, and because the media had put Ryan's name in print, many people were approaching Jason, asking if it was his brother that had been arrested for drugs. He wanted to quit his job because he was so embarrassed, and he took his anger out on the whole family. He refused to speak to Ryan, and he moved out of the house to live with a friend. With Ryan's name being all over the news, his employer at the time called him in and fired him without cause, which was a devastating blow to him, but he didn't let that keep him down for long, and he had another job within a month. The emotional toll something like this takes on a family is immense. The sleepless nights, the tears, the guilt of where we went wrong is overwhelming. As his mom, I go over and over in my mind his upbringing to see if there were any warning signs. We have what I call normal beliefs, discipline, etc. His father and I divorced when he was 5 and Jason was 3, but we did everything possible to keep normalcy in their life, including buying houses on the same street. Both of our kids were very involved in sports, disciplined sports. In school, it was basketball, track, hockey, and volleyball. Outside of school, it was AAA hockey and lacrosse. Ryan was very popular with his peers and had many friends in both school and his sports teams. I started to notice Ryan changing his friend group in grade 10. I really didn't think much of it, since meeting new people is normal when you get into a school with kids from different parts of the city. I would ask who the kids were he was spending time with and what he knew about their family. He always assured me that they were good people and that I had nothing to worry about. I had no reason at this point not to believe him. Grade 10 is also when he met the girlfriend he had throughout his addiction. He seemed to spend more and more time away from home. I remember being that age and always wanting to be with my friends, and because he was still so involved with sports, I actually thought it was good for him to have other kids to hang out with outside of the athletic teams. I had no idea that Ryan was skipping school and smoking weed with his new group of friends. He said that at first he was just hanging out with them while they smoked it, but over time he became curious as to why that's all they wanted to do. So he tried it, and that first puff was the start to a road of addiction and trouble. Ryan says that some people don't believe that marijuana is addictive or that it is a gateway drug. But from his experience, he can assure you it can be both of those things. It was in 2011 when Ryan was in grade 11, that was the first time that we caught him with marijuana. We did not approve of it being in the house, and this is when we started butting heads. Ryan was becoming disrespectful and argumentative. He was also losing interest in playing the disciplined high sports that had been a huge part of his upbringing. I remarried in 2009, and my husband became Ryan's hockey and lacrosse coach. Brad was noticing Ryan was losing interest in playing at a high level, and that caused some friction between the two of them. Brad knew that Ryan had the potential to go somewhere with hockey or lacrosse, and at the age of 16, a year earlier than most, he was asked to sign a junior card. I was excited for the opportunity presented to him, but he felt that it was too much of a commitment, which involved working out, and all he was interested in was partying with his friends, so he turned down the offer. It got to a point that Ryan only wanted to be with his non-athletic friends, and he quit playing sports altogether. At the age of 17, the friction in the house was insurmountable, so Ryan moved in with a friend whose mother allowed them to smoke weed in the house. I wasn't overly concerned at this point because they lived 3 minutes from me, and he and I spoke every day, whether in person or on the phone. I didn't realize that marijuana was something you could become dependent on, or that it could lead to harder drugs. I figured it was just a phase he was going through. It was that same year that Ryan had been out with friends one evening and they were pulled over by the police. The police had witnessed his friend go to the door of a known drug house and purchase marijuana. The officer handcuffed them all and asked who the drugs belonged to. Since the friend that got the drugs refused to confess, they were all arrested and held overnight at the police station. He was released in the morning with a court date, and after pleading guilty to possession, he received a year's probation and community service hours for being in the car that night. This incident caused him to move back home. Ryan wasn't a great student, and by grade 12 he was skipping more classes than he attended and struggled to complete assignments. I'm grateful for the teacher that saw him struggling, but also saw potential in him and pushed him to get his grade 12 diploma. That summer, he started working at a pool company. I thought this would be a great place to work, lots of hard physical labor to keep both his mind and body occupied. I couldn't have been more wrong. Ryan and his crew worked long, hard hours in the heat, all of them intensely physical. Before long, Ryan gave in to the peer pressure he was feeling and tried oxycodone, which everyone in the crew was taking to ease the pain of the heavy lifting and wheelbarrowing. He had no experience of taking pills and had no knowledge of how quickly one can become addicted to them. He had tried the drugs for a week, and when he stopped, he got very sick, so he continued to take them. Unfortunately, it did not take long for the tolerance of the pills to make him feel like he needed something stronger, and that's when he was introduced to heroin. He went from taking pills every day to sniffing lines of heroin every day, which would cost $100 to $150 every single day. That was more than he made in a day's work, and the struggle of always being out of money was very stressful. He found himself constantly lying to his father and myself to get money, and we always gave it to him, not knowing it was going towards drugs. At the age of 19, Ryan had his own apartment, and unbeknownst to us, his heroin addiction was spiraling out of control. He became a high-functioning addict, which meant as long as he kept taking the drugs, he could continue with his day-to-day activities. His tolerance would increase, and so would his dosage. He continued to ask for money, which I would give him. Even though he worked full-time, I had chalked it up that his reason for asking was because he was trying to keep up with the cost of him living independently. He kept his addiction very well hidden from us. He lived this way right up to that awful night in 2016. The shock of finding out my child was addicted to drugs was incomprehensible to me. Not my child. How did this happen? How did I not know when Ryan and I were so close? How did I not see it? He hid it very well, and that is why as parents, we need to have those conversations and let them know that we are there for them no matter what. He was so scared of disappointing us and how we would react that he never had the courage to come forward, and that broke my heart. There are so many emotions we go through when we find out our child has addiction problems. There's shock, anger, embarrassment, guilt, and despair at times. It is okay to have those feelings and know that you're not alone, even though it may feel that way at first. For some, you may feel that you don't know where to turn to or who to talk to. But you need to reach out as soon as possible to find the resources you need to help cope with the situation. For me, those feelings didn't last long. I went into mama bear mode quite quickly and decided I would do whatever it took to get my son over this hurdle, no matter what. We were fortunate because Ryan wanted all the help he could get. I couldn't imagine just how difficult this journey would have been had he not been a willing participant. Ryan was very open and honest about his addiction, which made it easier to get him the help he desperately needed. I was worried he wouldn't want to comply with his bail conditions because he would be actively trying to find more drugs because of the withdrawals, but he made it very clear he would do whatever it took to change his life and get clean. The family doctor had seen Ryan the day he was released on bail and put him off work for a month to start the difficult journey of recovery. When Ryan returned to his job, he made sure he followed his bail rules to a T, which was a great relief to our family. He also gave me his bank card from day one and asked that his entire paychecks go towards his legal bills, as he knew they would be in the thousands of dollars, and he didn't want the burden to fall on Mark or myself. When you have no experience with addiction, you have no idea who to call or where to go for help. What I did know is we had to reach out and research everything we could, and fast. I grew up in a small town, so my knowledge of these types of drugs was almost non-existent because it wasn't something I grew up around, or did I think I'd need to be educated on, because in my mind, it would never be a part of my family or my inner circle. Now I was living this, and I didn't know where or who to turn to. I just began. I began by going online and researching drug addiction, opioid use, methadone, mental health, you name it, I Googled it. I became obsessed with following the news, researching criminal penalties for trafficking and criminal negligence, and also where to get emotional support for my son's well-being. I did get some answers, but often have more questions than answers. We sought out the help of a psychotherapist fairly quickly to help Ryan talk through how he got where he was with the addiction. That counselor mentioned to reach out to the CMHA for extra help, as addiction is one of the areas they specialize in. She wasn't sure what she could offer Ryan as far as the addiction was concerned. We are so glad she gave us the CMHA's information, as they are a huge reason Ryan is where he is today in his recovery. Ryan was introduced to Sheldon, an addiction counselor from the CMHA, in the spring of 2017, and he has changed his life forever. We are so grateful for him. I always enjoyed picking Ryan up from his sessions because he was so pumped up about what Sheldon taught him, and he loved sharing with me what he had learned. He tells me that Sheldon always makes him think outside the box. I strongly believe that no one can beat addiction without support, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention the support I've had from my wonderful boss and coworkers who understood I needed time off to help Ryan. Before I speak more about the CMHA and Sheldon, I wanted to address our experience with the criminal justice system. Sorry. Defense attorneys, Crown attorneys, the courts, probation, parole officers, the judges, the prison officers, and administrators. To be frank, I found the whole process frustrating. Finding a defense attorney was fairly easy, but fairly costly, or very costly. A straightforward guilty plea cost roughly $35,000. The court delays were maddening, but I'm so grateful that we had that time to get Ryan healthy and well into his recovery. Ryan's lawyer made several appearances in court and had many meetings with the Crowns and judge. A guilty plea seemed to take longer than necessary. All in all, it still took 2 years and 4 months for him to be sentenced. That was with a guilty plea. The Crown was asking for 6 years in prison. They had started at 9 years, which I felt had a lot to do with the concern of public outcry. His lawyer asked for a rehabilitative sentence of less than 2 years. On November 16th, the day we thought Ryan was going into custody, they were not able to submit everything they needed for the judge, so he asked for written submissions to be handed in, and he was set a sentencing date for February 7th, 2019. As excited as I was to have my son home for Christmas, I knew Ryan just wanted to get it over with so he could get on with his life. Even though we were expecting him to go into custody, we still felt that 3 years was a longer sentence than he deserved. He had done amazing work in the community and impacted many lives, as well as having been clean for 28 months. The Crown attorneys. There were 2 assigned to Ryan's case. One was for the drug charges, the federal Crown, and the other was for the criminal negligence charge, the provincial Crown. I understand they have a job to do, but where did all the impartiality, the fairness go? I suppose I found this to be the most frustrating part of Ryan's journey. Having them make Ryan out to be an awful person was very hard to stomach. My son had a drug addiction. Why couldn't they understand that? One of the most upsetting things said by the Crown is that when they used a case about a girl that was sexually abused at the age of 8 and 11, then raped as a teen, assaulted by a parent, and had CAS involvement, which made her begin abusing drugs and alcohol at an early age. The Crown stated that this was a backdrop which establishes a convincing explanation for her addiction, and that in Ryan's situation, he came from a great family, he played sports, went on vacations, volunteered as a teen, had a full-time job, had a car. So basically, there was no reason for him to become an addict. He tried drugs, he became addicted, and then became a middleman for like-minded addicts. I found the judge in his summations for his decision to be as uneducated as the Crown attorneys. As part of his reasoning for giving Ryan a custodial sentence, the judge reiterated the Crown's theory and basically said that Ryan did not have any reason to become an addict. These types of comments are very damaging. This is the stigma about addiction the CMHA fights on a daily basis. Saying he had no real reason to become an addict because he had a good upbringing is appalling. It is obvious that those in a position of power in the legal system need to be educated on addiction, and I truly hope this happens in the very near future. It has to happen if we have any hope of overcoming the opioid crisis our country is experiencing. The correctional system. I know we all face challenges in our job. Limited resources, too much work, not enough time. But our correctional system needs an overhaul, both provincially and federally. There isn't enough being done to screen the inmates going in, there isn't enough inmate supervision, and there are far too many drugs somehow being available to the inmates. Every type you can think of is available to them. How do you expect addicts to get clean if the drugs are more readily available in prison than they are on the street? There were too many delays administratively. When Ryan went into custody, he first had to be admitted to the jail in Penetang to await his transfer to the federal penitentiary in Kingston. That process took 2 weeks, and that first week in custody was a very scary transition for me as his mom. I just wanted to make sure he was okay. Once I got to see him in person, it was a bit of a relief, and I felt I could finally sleep at night. When Ryan arrived in Kingston, there were certain things I was able to send him, such as a TV, money, clothes, and books. The prison is constantly short-staffed, and things take forever to happen. Even though the money took 3 weeks before he had access to it, the other items took much longer. I understand it's prison, and it's not supposed to be an easy time, but in my opinion, it makes an already volatile situation worse. Not having access to things that are just sitting in a room instead of being issued to the inmates needs to be addressed. In order to visit, we had to fill out paperwork and send pictures of ourselves. I was told it could take 6 to 8 weeks to get approval to see Ryan, and that was very upsetting. It actually took them 6 weeks to complete the process. Having to go to a place like that to visit my son was very nerve-wracking. Going through the metal detector to having the drug dog sniff all over me to having my glasses swabbed for drugs was intense, but I understand the reason they needed to do it. I was grateful that the guards on duty were very friendly and patient. Because Ryan had yet to see a parole officer, our visit had to be through glass. As excited as I was to see him, it was very hard on me not to be able to hug my son. It was on my next visit just 2 weeks ago that I finally got my hug. What a relief to be able to sit and visit with him. The one positive thing I can say about the criminal justice system is that it does allow inmates to be released after 1/3 of their sentence, barring good behavior and completion of any programs they may be required to complete. We are hoping to have Ryan home by February 2020. Now, back to CMHA and addiction counselor Sheldon. Ryan became very close to his counselor Sheldon. With Sheldon's guidance and support, Ryan was able to share his story of hope to some students at a local public school. He was very hesitant about it as he was very nervous at the thought of public speaking. I told him to think about the impact he could have on these kids, and hopefully they could take something away from his story. In April 2018, he spoke in front of 100 grade 6 to 8 students. Seeing the reaction from the students, teachers, and parents that attended is a day I will never forget. Having people hug him and say how proud they are of him really changed the way he thought of himself. And in that moment, I knew he was proud of himself and that he was on a path to amazing things. After that speech, he was asked to speak at more schools. The emails kept coming, and one speech led to many speaking engagements at schools in Simcoe County and York Region. Before long, he had been sharing his message of hope to 24 schools. Teachers and principals were sharing their story with their colleagues, which gave him even more opportunities. Being there to watch him interact with the kids was amazing. It was obvious they could relate to him, and they always asked great questions, which he handled with honesty and integrity. His message to them is that drug addiction can happen to anyone, not just people with messed up families or trying to hide from something. He always tells them that they have to make good choices and to surround themselves with good people. He encourages them that if they've already tried drugs, to please stop, and if they haven't, then to please not start. Another strong message Ryan has for the kids is to reach out and ask for help, whether it be a parent, teacher, or just someone they can trust, and to not be afraid to ask for help if they're going down a bad path or struggling in any way. Several teachers felt compelled to write letters about the impact Ryan's story had on not only themselves and visiting parents, but also on their students. Several teachers described how, after his speech, one or more of their students reached out for help themselves. Receiving letters with personal stories of the impact Ryan's story made on the students was validation that his message of hope was creating a positive change. One of the teachers even messaged me that a group of the kids were asking about Ryan on a regular basis, so we decided to surprise them one day and stopped in. They were very excited to see him. It was during one of his meetings with Sheldon that Ryan was told he was being nominated for an award through the CMHA called the Champion Award. This is awarded to the person that has shown resilience through their journey with mental health and addiction. Although he did not win, it was a true honor to be nominated and made him feel so proud that Sheldon felt that he deserved it. Even though Ryan was going through such incredible stress, he took it upon himself to nominate me for the Support Award, which is for the person that has shown unfailing support and encouragement for their friend and or loved one. I was honored to have won. He read out his nomination in front of the crowd of people, and then I had to go up and do a short thank you speech, which I was not prepared for in the least. I was a blubbering mess, and in my mind, I thought it was silly to get an award for supporting my son. I'm his mother, of course I will support him, no matter what. On September 28, 2018, he was the guest speaker at the CMHA Keep Talking Gala. He was so honored to have been asked to speak at such an important event. He was a little nervous about speaking to adults because he didn't know if they would judge him for being a recovering addict. He once again did an amazing job and received some wonderful feedback from the guests, including the MP, John Broussard. Mr. Broussard asked if he could set up a meeting with Ryan to discuss the legalization of marijuana and his thoughts on it. They met a couple weeks later, and Ryan really enjoyed their conversation. That was another example of a moment he felt proud that he was making a difference in his community. Other organizations started to reach out for meetings as his name was getting around the community in a positive way. He met with the public health nurse, who was part of the newly formed Simcoe-Muskoka Opioid Strategy Steering Committee, to give his input on the opioid crisis. He also met with the manager of the RBH Outpatient Mental Health and Addiction Service to offer the use of his story whenever it was needed. A paramedic who was at one of the school speeches shared his story with their Prevent Alcohol and Risk-Related Trauma in Youth team in hopes of using it in their messaging. In November, he was the guest speaker at the HSJCC conference in Richmond Hill, speaking on the opioid crisis. He received some incredible encouragement from the guests, including a police detective and the MPP from Brampton, who was especially touched by his story since he had lost a brother to an overdose just a few months earlier. He offered to help Ryan any way he could. Being out there in the public eye has made a huge impact on my son. It has given him a real purpose he said he never had before. He's hoping to become an addiction counselor after he's finished with his legal troubles. Sheldon had a huge impact on that decision. He knows what amazing work Sheldon did with him, and in turn, he would like to give someone else that same experience that may be struggling with mental health or addiction. During his time of house arrest, he successfully completed several online courses on addiction counseling. His future goal is to attend school, and he was honored to have been offered a job at the CMHA as a peer support worker. This gives him something to look forward to in the future, and I believe he will be a wonderful addition to their team. He also found the love of golf during this trying time. He says it's like a sense of therapy for him to be outside in the peace and quiet. It also allowed him to take his mind off his troubles for a few hours. Ryan is living proof that anyone can take a tragic situation and turn it into something positive. Those changes cannot be done alone. He is very fortunate to have an amazing support team behind him. These include his counselor, members of the CMHA, family friends, as well as 2 doctors to support his mental and physical well-being. These resources aren't always available to those suffering and struggling through addiction. In fact, it isn't the norm. We've heard many stories of people not having any support. They've been kicked out of their homes, parents and family disowning them, and having nowhere to turn. That really breaks my heart. One of the things Ryan says in his speech is that many people may have chosen to try drugs, but they certainly don't choose for the drugs to take over their lives. As a parent, I couldn't imagine not being there for my son and giving 100% into helping him get clean and change his life for the better. We as parents need to be there with open arms for our children. They didn't ask to be brought into this world, so I feel it's our responsibility and duty to support them no matter what. I understand that everyone's situation is different. There may be violence involved, or other children that may feel scared to be around an addict. In these cases, then I feel that help needs to be done from afar. That could mean helping with rent if you can, or giving them the numbers of people and organizations they can go to get help from. Please do not give up on anyone with mental health and addiction problems. They need help more than ever, and no one can beat addiction without a support team. Right after his arrest, Ryan made the choice to cut ties with all the bad influences in his life, shut down all his social media, and even changed his phone number. He knew that in order to change his life, he had to make a clean start. We wanted him to concentrate on getting healthy, so in order for that to happen, he needed to remove all means of communication out of his life. That in itself was very overwhelming at first. Very quickly, I noticed that anything we suggested to Ryan that we thought would help him, he was open and eager to try. I knew that he wanted to get healthy and feel normal again, so along with counseling, we started to volunteer in the community through the CMHA. Seeing him interact with the workers, clients, and other volunteers was an amazing feeling because I knew it made him feel like he was worth something. During the time of his addiction and shortly after his arrest, he went through a feeling of despair that people would look down on him for being an addict. Once he began interacting with new people, he felt a sense of pride. He would tell his story and they would tell him how courageous he was and what an amazing job he was doing changing his life. The CMHA does amazing work in the community, and I've loved that Ryan and I were given the opportunity to volunteer at several of their events. Marg, Liz, Lynn, Sheldon, and Nancy, the CEO of the CMHA, have been a huge support throughout this journey, even attending court dates to show Ryan they are there for him, always. Knowing that they will one day become his colleagues has given him the strength to keep moving forward and to stay focused on his future. I truly don't know, I truly don't know where we would be without this amazing team of people. We do have an opioid crisis in Simcoe County, hell, this country, and we need to speak up and encourage people that are suffering to ask for help. We need to smash the stigma, which, by the way, is another incredible organization that raises money for the CMHA through different events in our community. Smash the stigma regarding mental health and addiction as a sign of weakness. These people do not need to be judged or discriminated against. They need love and support and to know people care and are willing to help. So many people are afraid to talk about mental health and addiction, but I hope that seeing celebrities, emergency workers, doctors, teachers, etc., coming forward with their stories of despair will encourage others to do the same. I have a quote that was sent to me, and truer words couldn't have been spoken. It reads, "Drug addicts are not bad people, or just some junkies and losers who deserve to die. They're actually good people who have families that love them, but just end up being a victim to the disease of addiction. And they can't help it. So if you can't help them, don't hurt them. And instead of judging them, pray for them." Unfortunately, there are many people that stigmatize addiction and mental health, and all I can say to them is I really hope that something like what we've been through never touches their family. But if it does, I hope they will open their hearts and get the help that they will need. Ryan told me that even though this has been a devastating turn of events in his life, he is grateful that it happened. He honestly doesn't know if he would be here today to give others hope, as he could very well be dead from a drug overdose. I have many people ask me how I'm able to get through these trying times, and my response is this. We have met some remarkable people throughout this journey, and it has given my son a purpose he says he's never had before. I may have to visit my son in prison, but I am grateful every single day that I don't have to visit his grave. We will come through this stronger and more resilient than before, while hopefully making a difference for others along the way. One word of advice I have for anyone that finds themselves or their family at the center of a news story is to ignore all the negativity that comes along with it. The media, as you know, like to embellish stories and like to leave out the important points from the truth. I refuse to read or listen to any of the reports about Ryan, and I suggest that if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, that you would do the same. Nothing good can come from reading that garbage, or the comments from people that have no idea what the truth is, or anything about your family. I know who the supportive, important people are in our lives, and I choose to surround myself with them during this difficult time. As emotional and difficult this journey has been, I couldn't be prouder of Ryan. He has given many people hope that they too can change their lives for the better, and is the inspiration for me being here today to share our story. He's never blamed anyone else for what happened that night, and from the beginning took full responsibility for the choices he made. His resilience and strength amaze me. He's been clean for over 2.5 years, and he's using his time in prison to keep learning all he can about addiction so he can get prepared for his job at the CMHA. Mm-hmm. Ryan has a tattoo on his arm to remind him of what he's been through, and it reads, "The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be." I cannot wait to see the impact he will make in our community as a peer support worker. In closing, there are 4 things I would like you to take away from this. Addiction can happen to anyone, even those with a good family and with a good upbringing. No one can beat addiction without support. Anyone can take an awful situation and turn it into something positive. And lastly, stopping the stigma surrounding mental health and addiction starts with each and every one of us. Thank you so much for being here. Sorry. It's been a pleasure.
open to questions?
Yeah, does anybody have any questions or?
I'm a little bit curious about something.
Okay,
So, I don't know if you would know this or not, but when they were sentencing Ryan, did they take into consideration all the things he was doing in the community in the last few years?
they did.
Talking,
I was actually surprised that the Crown actually acknowledged all of the work that he did in the community. So that was acknowledged. The judge did acknowledge it as well. However, I mean, 5 people almost died. And yes, it was a mistake. And 3 years, we're actually grateful that's all they got. I mean, they initially started at 9, so 3 years, like we had always said, if we got 3 years or less, we'll be able to handle it. You have to handle it anyway, whatever you got, but yeah. So they did acknowledge.
So he got 3 years. Is he likely to get out for good behavior earlier?
We're hoping. He is eligible at a third of his sentence, which would be February of next year. However, he can apply for day parole, which 6 months into your sentence, you can apply for that. However, you have to be halfway through your program, and his program does not start until next Thursday. So his day parole date is technically August 7th. So as long as, you know, you have to take lockdowns into consideration, things like that, he needs to get through roughly his 4-month program beforehand, but he will be applying to get out on day parole. So he will be able to start his job hopefully sooner than later, and then he would just have to report to a halfway house until the 1/3 is up, and then he can come home.
Well, what is this program he has to do?
To be honest with you, he doesn't even really know what it's about because of the drug use. Even though he's been clean as long as he has, they are expected to take a program. He assumes it's going to be about addiction and things that they're trying to teach you, you know, things like if once you're out and you're in a social setting, maybe there's going to be drugs there. How are you going to handle the situation? And I believe it's more of that, but I don't think they really find out until the day they get in there and start it. But yeah, he's actually looking forward to it. Of course, it's going to help break up his day because it'll be every day for 4 months. So except the weekends, but yeah, he's looking forward to it, just to give him something to do. Hi, Nancy.
One of the things in one of Ryan's talk in the school that really shocked me was that he gave the talk and it was a grade 7 class, and that one of the boys in the classroom asked to speak with him afterwards and told Ryan that he was being bullied into taking drugs in grade 7.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly?
It was shocking.
I was so shocked
yes,
that
the
in grade
whole-
7, kids are being bullied to use drugs.
It was shocking to me, like a lot of his speeches that he did were for grades 6 to 8. It was shocking to me, the amount of kids